Hello, I'm Geetha Gurumuthu. You're watching The Context on BBC News. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris continue their tours of crucial battleground states after President Biden is accused of calling Trump supporters garbage. He might have left the race for the White House, but President Biden has been at the centre of the latest election row in the United States. The president was responding to comments made by the comedian Tony Hinchcliffe at a Donald Trump rally on Sunday night, in which he said that Puerto Rico was a floating island of garbage. But in his response, Joe Biden got himself into a mess of his own.
And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico where I'm in my home state of Delaware. They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Well, Mr. Biden, who soon clarified his comments, he wrote on X, he said, "I referred to the hateful rhetoric about Puerto Rico spewed by Trump supporters at his Madison Square Garden rally as garbage, which is the only word I can think of to describe it. His demonization of Latinos is unconscionable. That's all I meant to say. The comments at that rally don't reflect who we are as a nation." Well, Kamala Harris was on damage control, vowing to serve all Americans.
I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for. I believe that the work that I do is about representing all the people, whether they support me or not. And as President of the United States, I will be a president for all Americans, whether you vote for me or not.
Well, both Harris and Trump are continuing their tour of crucial battlegrounds, holding competing events in Wisconsin and North Carolina. More than 3 million people have already voted in the swing state of Georgia, smashing records ahead of the November election. That's 2/3 of the entire election turnout from 2020 who've already voted in Georgia. But with 6 days to go, polls remain very tight. If we look at the national polls, you can see the Vice President Kamala Harris's early lead down to about a single point. But the candidate's share of the national vote won't decide the winner. Looking at the battleground states that could be decisive in this election, Donald Trump is ahead in North Carolina, Arizona and Georgia. You can see them at the bottom of the screen, but only by between 1 and 2 points. The other battlegrounds are even tighter. None of the leads that we're seeing are bigger than the margins of error that come with all polls. So everything's still to play for. Joining me now is the host of the Steve Gruber Show in Detroit. It's Steve Gruber himself. And from Chippewa Falls in Wisconsin is Pat Kreitlow, host of Up North News. Thank you both very much for being with us. And we're really keen to find out what people are calling in and saying to you. Pat, just kick us off and tell us what are people most keen to talk about right now?
Really, there's a lot of anticipation. Maybe dread is the right word. They just want this to be done. So many people already know who they're voting for. More than 1 million people have voted here in Wisconsin already, and they don't want to pay attention to the commercials anymore. They don't want to pay attention to these sideshows that keep coming up. They know how they're voting. They're voting based on everything ranging from their reproductive health care rights to economic concerns to concerns about our democracy. And so there really is just a lot of anticipation to get through these final 6 days.
And Steve, what would you say people are most thinking about right now?
Yeah, I agree with the comments I just heard right there. There's a lot of fatigue across Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. I'm sure all the battleground states being pounded by endless commercials. $200 million spent in Michigan just on the Senate race here, which is very, very tight, along with the national race. Same is true in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Ohio. Inundated would be a way to put it. Now, people are talking about the economy. They are concerned about the open border. They're also concerned about the amount of expenditures to places like Ukraine and the war there. So these are all things that come top of mind. But I think when you get down to it, I think it comes down to economic issues. Can people pay for their groceries? Can they pay their mortgage? Do they feel like they've put out too much money when they fill the car with petrol? That's the question in front of people here today. I think it's all economic, and I think that is the biggest driver of all, followed closely by the open border.
And are they coming down for Trump more?
In Michigan right now, it's about a 1-point Trump lead. There were 3 consecutive polls showing Donald Trump +1. They're good polls. It's Emerson, it's Insider Advantage, it's Atlas Intel. These are all very well-respected polls. I know another poll that's coming out tomorrow morning. It's also +1 Trump. So that's like 4 polls in a row +1. But look, +1% of Michigan is like, 60, 70,000 votes-ish. And in a race with this many people voting, that's very, very tight. I know it's just as tight in Pennsylvania, just as tight in Wisconsin. The so-called blue wall will be where this election is decided. How are those union voters going to go? But here's one little bit of insight I know about the poll coming out in the morning. Donald Trump's doing very well, and this is not a surprise, and Kamala Harris's campaign knows this. Donald Trump doing exceptionally well with men, but he's doing well with young men, 18 to 29. That demographic, which would historically go for the Democrats strongly, has shifted to Donald Trump, and that is problematic. The biggest gender gap maybe ever in a presidential election in America is about to unfold.
And that's despite him coming to Detroit and saying what he said.
Coming to Detroit and saying what?
Well, when he was talking about the rest of America following Detroit's path.
Look, Detroit is not what Detroit used to be. It's the only city in America that went above 1 million people and now is less than 1 million people. Detroit has a lot of work to do to come back to where it was. He certainly didn't insult people in Detroit. They know that there's a lot of work to be done. And across the whole state of Michigan, across the Rust Belt in general, factories have closed, people have lost jobs. That's why union members at the Teamsters and the UAW, their leadership may support Kamala Harris. Their rank and file supports Donald Trump. That's clear in all the numbers you see. And that's been going on since Donald Trump came down the escalator in 2015. And it is working class people. There's a shift going on in this country. It's a populist movement. The people that used to support Democrats, like blue-collar workers, have shifted to Donald Trump in great numbers. Working men. And Kamala Harris was caught on a hot mic with Governor Gretchen Whitmer here over the weekend, and she said, I have a trouble with men, and then realized she was on a hot mic. They know they have trouble with men, and that's working-age men of all races, black men, white men, Hispanic men. They have a problem with men, and they have a problem with working people, and that's going to be potentially determinative in all of the Rust Belt states.
And Pat, where you are you seeing that gender divide, both in people's views and also whether people are going to turn out and vote or have taken part in early voting, if that's available there?
Yeah, I agree that there is a divide. The divide is a tectonic shift that has moved in the suburbs of Wisconsin, around Milwaukee, around the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and around Green Bay, where women are looking at economic issues as well as issues of bodily autonomy. And they're saying, do we want somebody in who's going to, raise tariffs and cost us so much money for our groceries, for all of our goods? We have a state that is built on farming. All of these farmers are wondering whether they can withstand another trade war. And you have people in the suburbs, when you talk to them about their concerns again are about the stability of government. And we were at, I don't want to say ground zero, but we played a central role. There were Wisconsinites who played a central role in the attempted coup of January 6, 2021. So people are aware here more than ever before how precious democracy is, how precious their individual vote is. And so I think that when all is said and done and you look at both the suburban vote and the rural vote, there are going to be some surprises, I believe, come next Tuesday.
And when both these figures are holding rallies, Pat, do you think that gets attention? Do people like the fact that they're coming to the battleground votes, or are people really getting their information online through social media clips and also, of course, through the traditional media?
I would call it the cost of doing business. The fact of the matter is people still recall how Hillary Clinton did not make a Wisconsin visit in 2016 at key moments. And so there is not a Democratic ticket that will ever, again, take Wisconsin for granted and make more appearances than they think is necessary. And frankly, again, in a close margin like this state's going to be, like Michigan, like Pennsylvania, you're not just trying to make sure somebody shows up or votes early. You're trying to get them to, if not bring a friend, have a conversation with a friend that maybe gets them to vote for the first time or vote for the first time differently than how they did all their lives up until this year.
Well, Pat Kreitlow and Steve Gruber, it's great to talk to you both and hear the conversations that you're hearing too a little bit for our audience. Thank you both very much indeed for being with us.